Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today, and today we're going to be talking about why the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to run the Western Conference next season. I know the Thunder finished the 1 seed in the Western Conference last season with a record of 57-25, and definitely already ran through the Western Conference last year. But the difference for me is that they've improved on multiple categories that I'm going to talk about that I think will make their team even better next season. And not only have they improved in these categories, but some of the teams that, were very close to them last year have gotten worse. And I'm going to go over that. So, yes, did OKC finish number one in the Western Conference last year, but it's not like it was it's not like they were huge leaders as the 1 seed. Look at the Boston Celtics as the 1 seed last year. The 2 seed was was New York, and New York was 14 games behind Boston. Boston had a 14-game lead on the 2 seed. Now compare OKC to the 2 seed, the Denver Nuggets, who went 57-25. So the Thunder had the same record as the 2 seed. The only difference is that the Thunder won the tiebreaker against Denver. You want to look at Minnesota, the 3 seed. Minnesota was only 1 game back from OKC. You want to look at the Clippers, the 4 seed. They were only 6 games back. Look at you can go to the 5th seed, even with Dallas. They were only 7 games back. So OKC didn't have a huge lead on the 4 of their top 5 teams in the Western Conference, but I think with the additions they've made this offseason so far, they will make huge leaps. Because look at some of the teams in the Western Conference. A lot of these out of the top 5 teams, a lot of them have gotten worse. I don't think you could say that for Dallas, because Dallas has gotten pretty better with adding in Klay Thompson and doing making some of the additions they've made. So you can't make that argument with Dallas. I think they've gotten better. But look at Denver. They have lost Reggie Jackson and they have lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They haven't really added anything in yet. Look at the Clippers. They have lost Paul George. They've lost other pieces this offseason. Yes, they've added in some solid pieces in this offseason, but at the same time, I think they're going to be a lot worse. Minnesota, yes, have they lost some decent pieces, but I feel like they've added some good players in as well. They drafted Rob Dillingham. They signed Joe Ingles. So Minnesota, they have lost a couple pieces. They lost Joe Ingles. I think that loss will hurt them. Kyle Anderson is what I meant, not Joe Ingles. So they lost Kyle Anderson. They lost a couple other players. I think those losses will hurt them, but they made a great replacement for Kyle Anderson with adding in Joe Ingles, drafted Rob Dillingham. So I think Minnesota will be great next year as well. So I think the only teams in the Western Conference that were kind of close to OKC last year that are going to have a little bit of downfall are Denver and LA. But OKC, the additions that they've made improve their team a whole lot. And one thing I want to get to is rebounding, because rebounding was a really big weak spot for OKC. If you look at some of the leaderboard and stats out of all teams, OKC was pretty much at the top of everything. But rebounds was one of their weakest stats. They were 27th in rebounding last year. It was horrendous rebounding. The only teams that were worse rebounding than OKC was Washington, Charlotte, and Indiana. So they were the 27th worst team in rebounding last year. But they added in Isaiah Hartenstein. And you bring in Isaiah Hartenstein, who averaged 8.3 rebounds per game with the New York Knicks in only 25 minutes per game. I think we could all assume that Isaiah Hartenstein is going to get more than 25 minutes per game with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So you pair him with a guy like Chet Holmgren, who's now going to be moving to power forward and average 8 rebounds per game. This OKC team is going to be a lot better with rebounding, adding in Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, because Alex Caruso is not a terrible rebounder as well. So their rebounding has gotten a lot better, adding in Caruso and Hartenstein, and there's a lot of things that have gotten better with their additions, and I'm going to go over those as well. So the other thing that I believe has gotten better with their team is the Thunder were number 1 in 3-point percentage last year at 38.9. Now there were a couple teams that were kind of close to them in that number, but they shot 38.9% from 3. And let's look at what they've gotten rid of and what they brought in. They get rid of Josh Giddey, who shot 31% from 3, but they bring in Alex Caruso, who shot 38% from 3, and Isaiah Hartenstein, who shot 32% from 3. Now that's I mean, even though they were number one in 3-point percentage, they've still found a way to improve their 3-point shooting, adding in Caruso and adding in Hardenstein and getting rid of Josh Giddey. It's crazy that their 3-point shooting has gotten better, even though they were the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA last season. Now, another thing is defense. Defensively, this team, who was already so good last year, are even better. Let's get to that. So, last year, they were number one in steals per game at 8.5, but they get rid of Josh Giddey, who only averaged 0.8 steals per game. But they bring in Alex Caruso, who averaged 1.3 steals per game, and bring in Isaiah Hartenstein, who averaged 0.7 steals per game. Now, another stat that OKC was number one at. OKC was tied with the Boston Celtics at number one for most blocks per game at 6.6. Josh Giddey leaves, who averaged a half a block per game. Alex Caruso comes in, who averaged a half a block per game. And not only that, but Isaiah Hartenstein comes in, who averaged 1 block per game. But also want to mention, Isaiah Hartenstein averaged 1 block per game, but that was on 25 minutes per game. So I would assume his block numbers probably go up with his minutes going up as well. Same thing goes with Isaiah Hartenstein's rebounds. Like, I could see Hartenstein getting 9 to 11 rebounds per game with the minutes going up from 25, assuming most likely he probably gets 30 to 32 minutes a night is what I would assume. I would say 30 minutes a night probably for Hartenstein. So defensively, even though they were tied at 1 in blocks per game and number 1 in steals per game, they have still found a way to improve on those additions and improve their defense, even though they were so good defensively last year. With Shea and, all the other pieces they have defensively, they've still found a way to improve defensively. Now, another thing I really love about this Thunder team that I think is just going to make them better is their bench unit is filled with great 3-point shooting. I mean, now that they're sending Lou Dort to the bench, this 3-point shooting off the bench is absolutely incredible. Oh my God. I mean, it's crazy just to look at, but then what I'm about to say to everybody about this 3-point shooting bench that's filled with good defense, good 3-point shooting, good scoring. So with Lou Dort most likely going to the bench because they've added in Caruso and Hardenstein. Lou Dort from 3 shot 39.5%. Isaiah Joe, these are all the players that are going to most likely get minutes off their bench. Dort shot 39.5% from 3. Isaiah Joe shot 41.6% from 3. Kason Wallace shot 41.9% from 3 as a rookie. Aaron Wiggins had the best 3-point percentage on the team last year at 49.3. Jalen Williams, who's a big man, shot 37% from 3. And Kenrich Williams shot 36% from 3. There is not a guy off this bench that is shooting less than 36% from 3. And outside of Kenrich Williams, everybody is shooting over 37%. So the shooting off the bench is absolutely outstanding. And, they can go 11-man deep. They really can. Because I just mentioned 6 guys off the bench who are all great 3-point shooters. And I think all guys that OKC would love to get involved into their offense. I think it's going to be hard to go 11-man deep. But the reality is that they can go 11-man deep. And another thing that makes this Thunder team even more impressive going into next season is that I believe both J-Dub and Chet Holmgren will both have jumps into their year 2 and year 3. Even though Chet Holmgren is going into his 3rd season in the league, this is his 2nd playing season. Jalen Williams is going into his 3rd NBA season. I think Jalen Williams is going to be even better next season. Jalen Williams averaged 19, 4, and 4 last year. I think he's going to take a huge jump this next season. I could see him. I think he's going to definitely. I would say Jalen Williams is most likely, in my opinion, going to average over 20 points per game. I think he'll probably average around 21 to 23 points per game, and I could see him averaging 5 and 5 with that 21 to 23 points per game. I think he's going to have a huge breakout season that turns him into potentially an all-star next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I believe Chet Holmgren's going to have a big year as well. Last year he averaged 16.5 points per game with 8 rebounds per game and 2.3 blocks per game. I think his rebounds could go down with Isaiah Hartenstein coming into the lineup. If they go down, not by much, but maybe potentially 5 to 7 rebounds per game. I would say more likely 6 or 7 rebounds per game for Chet next year. But at the same time, I could see him averaging in the area of 18 to 20 points per game next year. I think Chet Holmgren's going to be just as good as Jalen Williams, and Shea couldn't be luckier to have two guys like Chet and Jalen Williams as the two best players on their roster. I've always heard that OKC, they need to add in an all-star next to next to Shea, and they need to add in a superstar next to these two guys. And I don't believe so, because I really think either one or two of these guys, talking about Chet and J-Dub, one or two of these guys, I think possibly both, are going to turn into all-stars next season. Look at Boston, a team in last year's season who had two all-stars and it was kind of talked about them potentially getting a third all-star if OKC takes a huge jump, because they won 57 games this year. If they get better, I mean, they could turn into a 60-win team potentially. So if they're at the Boston Celtics level, if they're playing as good as the Boston Celtics, they're going to get a second all-star. Most likely probably would be Jalen Williams. And also, I mean, they could be talking about potentially bringing in a third all-star. So I could see both J-Dub and Chet Holmgren being all-stars next season. And I think with the team that Shea has around him, this is a team that is great three-point shooting. You can look at their three-point shooting. They're a great three-point shooting team. In the starting lineup, there are definitely a little weak pieces with three-point shooting with Shea and Hardenstein, but Chet and J-Dub and Alex Caruso are all good three-point shooters. And then off the bench, with those six guys off the bench, there is not a bad three-point shooter off the bench. With Jalen Williams, Kenrich Williams, Kassan Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, and Lou Dort, and Isaiah Joe, there is not a bad three-point shooter off the bench. I believe OKC will be the best three-point shooting team in basketball next year. I think there will be much improved rebounding, and I think very, very great possibility that OKC will be the best defensive team in basketball next year. So if they're improved rebounding with adding in Hardenstein, which was a category they really struggled in, being 27th in the league, and their three-point shooting, even though they were just number one in the league, is better. And not only if their three-point shooting is better, but their defensive stats that they're already number one in are better. OKC is going to be even better than they were next year. The Western Conference, there are a couple teams that have gotten a little weaker that you can look at last year. Look at teams I think there are some teams in the Western Conference that have got better, but there are teams like the Clippers and the Warriors who have gotten weaker. Maybe even the Lakers if they're not able to make some good additions here. So the Thunder are looking at some teams in the Western Conference who have gotten a little weaker. You can even look at the Nuggets who have lost some key pieces on their roster. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say the West is weak because the West is anything but weak. The West is still stacked and is going to be, I think, most competitive we've ever seen. Even after this past season, I think the West is going to be even better than it has been before. But there are a couple teams who have lost some assets this year. So I'm excited to see how the Thunder do, but I think they are going to run the Western Conference. And I know they were number one in the Western Conference last year, but I think it can be to the point where look how Boston had a 14-game lead on the 2 seed. I'm not going to say OKC has that big of a lead on the 2 seed, but I think OKC could have that type of big margin in the other teams in the Western Conference. I think with how good OKC is going to be defensively, how good of a shooting team they're going to be, it's going to be hard to go up against them. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and peace out.